Your hair is fantastic tonight.
Happy
Today,
well,
tonight, wherever
thank
you are.
Well, I guess. Oh well, and on the subject of my hair, welcome to Really with Tom and Dave. Tom, first off, do you really like my hair?
I mean, it looks full-bodied today. It looks like it has, a kind of must but controlled quality.
It's not too fluffy, because that's the thing. When it's had a few days since I shampooed it, so it's not.
No, I mean it looks sort of vibrant. It has a real quality. It has, it's the standout quality of yours.
Because getting
right
the
now.
hair just right, I think that's one of the main problems that the hybrids are having. That's one of the main
alien hybrids
blocks. Before it's the one, I think it's the one thing holding back the invasion.
Yeah, to get Dave Foley quality hair,
just to get the hair right. They don't want to come down and
it's
be
not easily
mocked,
done. Yeah, that's true.
We're seizing control of your government. Yeah, but you look like a nerd.
I know, they can't get or they get like the straight forehead look, right? Can't get that sort of I don't know, easy listening feel that it has. I don't know what that means, but
I don't like a 70s FM DJ.
Yeah, something's happening in there. I don't know.
Yeah, a guy with puka shells.
So listen, that's important.
But we do have a great show about
what
what happened.
We have the best guests, I gotta say. We crush.
I'm excited.
We're crushing. We have an amazing guest today, and as much as I would love to catch up and remind all of you wonderful folks out there listening to please like and subscribe and do all that great stuff, so you can get us on demand whenever you like. But let me introduce Richard M. Dolan. For over 20 years, Richard Dolan has been one of the best-known UFO researchers in the world. He is the author of several groundbreaking books in the field, opening up fresh ways of understanding this perplexing subject. His massive 2-volume history, UFOs and the National Security State, has permanently altered our understanding of the history of UFOs and the government cover-up. He is co-author of the classic book AD After Disclosure, which opened up an entire conversation on how UFO disclosure could actually take place and what that might mean for the world. His book, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, remains the best single volume to discuss the full range of the UFO subject in all its complexity. It is excellent. I'm reading it right now. His most recent book, The Alien Agendas, is another unique contribution to the subject, being one of the few attempts to analyze the beings behind the UFO phenomenon by examining the long history of our encounters with them. And aside from being one of ufology's most engaging writers, Richard has been in front of the camera and microphone for many years and has spoken to audiences around the world. And these days continues working on book projects while managing an active website, richarddolanmembers.com, which features fresh writing, video, and audio content by Richard every week. And we welcome him to Really.
Hello.
Sir.
I'm totally excited to be here. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Thrilled to have you. This is fantastic. We've been very excited about this. Mm-hmm. How are you? What's going on?
I'm doing great. Thank you for the nice intro. And I have book projects happening all the time. I'm trying to finish a very long book now on water-based UFOs or USOs. It's been a 2-year project, and it's the longest book I've ever done. And I'm hoping to get this thing out of my hands within a couple of months. So we'll see.
Oh, great. Yeah. No, I look forward to that. Yeah, because that is a really interesting subject.
It's totally fascinating. It's been mind-blowing. That's the best way I could describe it. So maybe we could chat about that.
I mean, let's chat about it right now, because it's the longest book you've done. You have done incredible volumes that cover the history of this topic. Again, for our audience, who I think some are, regulars of the UAP topic, and some are new to the topic. I can't recommend strongly enough UFOs for the 21st Century Mind. It's kind of a new and expanded edition of your previous book. It's the definitive guide to the UFO mystery, and it's just a great template, foundation for what you would want to know from this topic, from ancient aliens all the way up to today. So I just want to plug that and
this is
recommend
exactly
it highly.
What we hope to do when we decided to have a podcast was to direct people to better sources than us. That was our
absolutely.
We go
1,000%.
You guys are good sources.
Yeah, we can just deflect people away. Go. You're interested in UFOs? Come here. Go there. Go over there. That's better. So this
But
is exactly what we wanted to do.
But how did USOs become this to expand? Because it feels like to me that's the sort of we have the least amount of information on, or it seems like what did you discover otherwise?
Yeah, it's really true. I mean, I've been engaged in this subject for about 30 years now. And I think everyone is instinctively intrigued by any story of which in which an object is seen exiting the water and zipping off. Like that's just
Yeah,
it's
it's
kind of
not
a tough
something.
thing to.
It's not how it's supposed to work.
No. So there have been a couple of pretty good books about that phenomenon in the past, but none of them were really, I would say, comprehensive. So a couple of years ago, someone on my website just. I'm trying to remember. They asked me a question about a particular case off the Aleutian Islands in 1945, so in the northern Pacific, and it was a case in which this is at the very end of World War II. A U.S. transport ship was heading back to the United States, and they encountered an object that seemed to come out of the water, circled around them a couple of times, and then zipped off. So it's a case that I'd known about, and someone asked me to do a little bit of a dive into it, and I did, and I did a little presentation for my site, and then I just kept going on these water-based cases. This was 2 years ago, and the next thing I knew, by the end of the summer of 2022, I was really into it, and I just kept looking for more sources. And what I realized is that they're scattered all over the place. There was no one single database where I could just find all of these water-based UFO cases. So I just scoured it as well as I could, and I found a bunch. I was lucky MUFON was able to give me access to their computerized database. MUFON's a very big organization. So I was able to use that and a bunch of others. And the next thing I knew, I've got 611 USO cases. That's unidentified submersible objects. And I try to do fresh write-ups of every one of them. I'm getting it illustrated, and I'm putting together this very substantial database that I'll be able to work into it. So it's become quite involved, but I'm excited. I'm in the home stretch, and one of the things that just blew my mind is how worldwide the USO phenomenon is, just like UFOs or UAP. They're everywhere. We get more reports in North America because, well, we just have a better infrastructure to report them, but they're everywhere. And some of these USO cases are extraordinary. I mean, there are a lot of Navy cases, a lot of civilian people, just folks standing at the beach, seeing this crazy thing happen off in the distance, or something up close and personal. One of the things that really caught me off guard was the number of cases that I found in which U.S. Navy guys would write in years after the fact, usually like 20 years, 30 years, and to some random blog site or maybe the National UFO Reporting Center or someplace, and they'll just tell their story. Here's what happened. I was in the Arabian Sea back in 1986, and this crazy thing happened. And what I noticed was that there are a lot of cases in which these objects seem to have the ability to completely shut down the electronics of major United States naval vessels, like to the point where communications down, weapon systems down, and on a few occasions, the ship itself would just be dead in the water for a certain period of time. And they're not confirmed. You can't get a FOIA request on them or get official confirmation. But my goodness, when you start seeing a pattern, I've got maybe a dozen of just those cases alone where these things were, probably more than that, interfering in some way with naval operations. And I figure, like, if I'm the United States Navy and I'm running my fleet, there's maybe nothing more important to me than my aircraft carriers. And there are cases when those things just become temporarily disabled.
Yeah, and they're powered by nuclear plants, nuclear power plants.
Yeah.
Which the idea is those should never turn off. Those should never run out of fuel.
Well,
they should never.
Yeah, there aren't too many cases where the ships seem to just be stopped, but more where the communications are disabled and the weapons are disabled.
Yeah, but their engines, they're still able to maneuver and.
Yeah, and sometimes not.
Yeah,
and sometimes not. So it's crazy.
So have we been looking in the wrong place? I mean, have we been looking up? And we should be looking down? I mean, because the one thing is, we starting to hear more of this. You're working on this book. You're finding all these stories. We've heard about how hard it is to get here from far distant galaxies and whatnot. I mean, do you think there's a case to be made that it's been sort of under us all the time, this phenomenon?
Yeah, it's a great question. I still tend to believe in an extraterrestrial solution to this phenomenon. It doesn't make sense. Like, how can you, we all know the distances out there are vast. I hear the astronomers and skeptics say all the time, well, it's just you people don't realize how far those stars are. And it's true. They are incredibly distant, but somehow someone's figured something out. But to answer your question, Tom, I would say when you think how the phenomenon first came to our attention in the 1940s, it was mostly aerial. It's still mostly an aerial phenomenon. And, you think of the mentality of the 1940s and 50s. It's like, well, we just learned to fly a couple of decades earlier. And you had a lot of people already talking about space. That was the next logical frontier. So what wouldn't be surprising that people would be assuming, oh, they're from another world, Mars or Venus or another solar system or what have you. So I don't think that's actually all that crazy to think that. But, and actually also, even in the earlier decades, there was some understanding that there were these occasional water-based cases. But I do think you're right in that we were not really looking at the oceans. I'm talking about private UFO researchers.
Right.
All that much. I mean, we're mostly landlubbers, myself included. I'm not really out on the oceans very much. So it's easy to forget that our Earth is mostly covered by water. But yeah, it turns out there's a lot of activity out there. I would have to emphasize when I look over all the raw UFO reports, and I've read thousands and thousands of them, water-based cases are a very small minority, but they're a significant subset of the greater phenomenon. And as such, I just think they need a little bit of attention. So
yeah, and I guess as you say, most people seem to prefer living on land.
Right. But you just have fewer witnesses too.
Yeah,
I mean,
so,
exactly. Yeah.
And it usually goes the most sightings tend to be where the most people are.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, for example, with the water-based cases, it's funny. I did a good thing, which was I had my little Google Earth, and every case that I have, I put a little pin on Google Earth. And so I'll show those in images in the book so people can see. But what I notice is that a large number of these cases are seen by witnesses at the shore of wherever they live. So big hotspot would be Puerto Rico, Southern California, a few other places. And, by and large, that's where the people are at the shore. They're not out deep in the water for the most part. So it really makes me think, there's a huge number of sightings at coastlines because that's where we're recording them. And I have to say, I wonder just how much activity is going on in the deeper parts of the oceans, because there are a bunch of cases out there, but we're not out there as often. So, even having 600 plus cases, I am realizing that is just skimming the surface of this phenomenon.
Yeah, because I would imagine that the only to see them out in mid-ocean, you'd have to be, I guess either military craft en route to a deployment or merchant vessels, container vessels.
Exactly.
And aren't there sort of USOs and UFOs that show up in historic logbooks from the tall ships days?
Yeah, I tried to go back as far as I could to look for really persuasive cases, and I found a bunch from the 19th century. And by the way, David, I just have to say, your hair does look great.
Thank you.
It is very much in the style. You ever look at pictures of guys in the 19th century? My opinion, they had the best hair.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how they did it.
Oh, yeah.
You check it out. They've got this perfect.
It's timeless.
It's true. The hybrids, they don't have the hair yet.
No, and you don't want to come down wispy.
No, that's the problem. So.
Yeah,
no.
But you were talking about older.
Got to get it right.
And there are a number of pretty good ones from the 19th century. There's one that I found from 1825, and it's an English ship that was a little bit off the coast of Hawaii. So they're out in the Pacific. And the ship's doctor actually made me think of Master and Commander. They had a good ship's doctor there.
Mhm.
This ship's doctor was named Andrew Bloxham with an X. And he wrote in a ship's log in 1825 about how I think at 3:30 in the morning, the night watch of the ship saw this huge, bright orange object sphere rise from the ocean, intensely bright at 3:30 in the morning, drop back down into the water, and then come up a second time. It was said that the light was so bright that you could pick a pin off the deck of the ship. So I keep thinking, is there any naturalistic explanation that I can imagine? I just can't think of one. So that's 1825. That's a heck of a case. There are some possible earlier good USO cases, but it's kind of tough for me to have confidence in some of them. So, my feeling is the really best recorded ones are from the maybe mid 18th century onward.
Mhm.
I'm not saying it wasn't a phenomenon earlier, but most people, the ocean traffic was much, much less back in those earlier days. And it was just harder to get good reports.
Mhm.
It seems to be something that will only become, as we pay more attention to it, it'll be really interesting to see, what additionally is learned. I am curious about your feelings about where this topic is today. I don't think anyone's more qualified to kind of gauge where, and I'm sort of, there's the day-to-day, there's the sort of boots on the ground day-to-day back and forth of this, on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And then there's sort of the 30,000 foot view, the kind of shifting consciousness on this topic. And I'm just curious where you think we are in both those areas, what your feelings are.
And I'm going to pay a quick compliment or pass on a quick compliment on when I first met George Knapp, when I was first sort of stumbling into the UFO arena, at the Storm Area 51 event.
You were there?
In the desert. Yes.
It was Dave's fault.
I went out there with Jeremy Corbell, and I really went. I was really looking forward to meeting George. So I met George, and one of the first questions I asked him is said, "Well, who do you listen to in the UFO world?" Because he was clear. He said, "There's so many crazy people out there," and he said, "So, well, who do you listen to?" And you were the first name he mentioned.
Oh, well, very, very flattered to hear that. I really admire George a lot.
Yeah,
high praise.
Great guy. As far as what I think.
Now back to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Enough about you. Let's listen to you.
Well, I think the UFO field, we've gone through a very big transformation since 2017, essentially. Since there's been at least some reasonable media attention, on this subject, and where it's not the kiss of death for a mainstream commentator to talk about it. So that's definitely a step in the right direction. For me, my perspective is interesting because, I broke into this field when my first published work came out in 2000. I self-published my first book, and because I had a kind of a cover-up conspiratorial tone. I am a conspiracy guy. If you want to know about a conspiracy theory, I'm your guy. That's how I feel. So I came into the field in that way, very political orientation on the UFO subject. And I got dragged, I'll say, into the whole disclosure topic, initially very much against my will. I thought, look, I don't want to get into these premature conversations about disclosure. Let's just make the case that there's a cover-up. And so, but of course, famous last words. I got into the whole disclosure thing. I went to all the conferences, did all the discussions, wrote a book on that. What I see now is that our field, understandably, is very, very worked up over, UAP hearings, congressional, the congressional interest in this subject, and that is important. That is good. But I'm seeing like a lot of things really seem to get lost in the shuffle with this subject, at least in the mainstream venue, and it's affected the rest of the community. So like, I don't hear anyone talking about abductions anymore. That's like gone. And the deep aspects of the cover up, I'm still waiting, for a really broad-based public conversation on the whole structure of how the secrecy is being maintained. But then again, like we're taking these baby steps toward a kind of better and better public conversation. We're still not at a point where you have any United States government agency that's actually said, yeah, we think these are not from here. Like no one's really saying that, even though a lot of people are tiptoeing around it. A lot of people obviously do believe that they're not from here. A lot of people in Congress have been briefed in classified sessions about the deep, profound nature of this reality. So I don't think there's any question there, but you still have a lot of hesitancy for some of these voices to really go all the way, which I guess that's understandable.
Well, it seems like they'll be comfortable enough with dismissing every other option. That, like, the Pentagon has gone through. They've said it's not foreign adversaries, it's not secret programs, and that kind of leaves only the really crazy solutions. But they won't. But still, they keep, as long as they keep saying we have no evidence of extraterrestrials, then the media will just keep ignoring it.
Yeah, exactly. And my feeling has always been it's a very difficult thing for the true secret keepers to admit this. I mean, this is a real can of worms. This subject is, it's a mess. 14 years ago, I did co-author a book on this back in 2010. And that feels like a different world on many levels too. But even then, my co-author Bryce Zabel and I, by the time we finished that book, after disclosure, the whole premise of it was, could there be a disclosure? If so, how could it happen? And if it happened, how would it rock our world, basically? And we didn't have a crystal ball. We just tried to be like a think tank and play this out in our minds. But what became evident was this is a total revolutionary development. I mean, you get political blowback. As supine as our media does tend to be, at some point, I've got to think if there's an admission that the UFO phenomenon is actually real and actually not from here, whatever that is, someone's going to have to ask, wait a minute. So are you telling me for the last 80 years, you guys have actually known this is true? Like, how have you kept this secret from us? At some point, someone's going to be asking that, someone other than me or some other person who's been in this field a long time. And that's not an easy question to get around because it deals with the corruption of our political institutions, our media, our academic institutions. All of them, I think in retrospect, we can see have really failed the public in the most fundamental part of their mission, which is public education and honesty. In the case of politicians, they're supposed to be honest. So that's a problem. But then you've got a whole array of other very difficult issues. One that I always was focused on was energy. I mean, I think, a 10-year-old kid who sees a zigzagging object zip off in the sky is probably going to realize that thing is not using high octane gasoline to go from here to there. It's using something better. And whatever that something is implicitly means a revolution in our global energy infrastructure, which could be great, but would be very disruptive for a lot of established interests. So that's a problem. And then it just goes on from there. It's like, well, if you acknowledge that this is real, then people want to know, are we safe? What is this? Who are they? What is there an agenda? Have you guys been communicating with them? What's your status on the secret technology that we now can assume you've got? And how deeply is this secret being kept from not just the people, but our actual own responsible government officials? Because a lot of it seems to be privatized on a significant level. And so it's a big mess. And I can't imagine.
I think about, we had a interaction with Chris Mellon, asking, and I asked him, what do you think we should be covering on this if we're doing a UAP podcast? Is there anything that's not being covered? And he said, should we disclose? He thought, like, is it everybody's pushing for the truth? Bring it out, bring out the ships. There, I get out. To your point, I think he had that same sense of concern or at least that this could be blow up in our faces in a way that maybe we can't adjust to.
Yeah.
I mean,
I can understand that. I mean, there's a recent conference out in California, the SOL conference, SOL.
Actually, Tom and I bizarrely were there.
Yeah, I almost went. But anyway, maybe the next time. And one of the themes out of that, and I think most of the folks who delivered there, there was definitely that sense, Tom, of this: should we slow this down? Should we control the process? I can kind of understand that. In a perfect world, if you have a government that you can actually trust, that you actually think works in good faith with you, then a controlled process would kind of make sense. My problem is I'm not in that belief system. I just don't think that they operate in good faith. And so that's a bit of a problem. My take is that, A, we don't really have that much control, as if we can control this process. We like to think that we can control it, but we're on a track. We're on a trajectory, and I don't really know who's got the ability to. You've got these two forces. Ever since we've had the internet, basically, we've had this ability to share all kinds of information. It's amazing. And it has definitely ramped up the UFO community in a lot of ways. It's made it stronger in a lot of ways, more divisive, but stronger in certain ways. At the other side of it, though, there's a definite consolidation of media control. We can all see that. Centralized management of narratives, really in every nation. Definitely Western nations are seeing this. My take is that those people who are managing this process, who still have dominant control over major media, whether big tech or legacy, if these people can delay any disclosure for 5 or 50 or 100 years, they will delay it for as long as possible. That's my belief. I just don't see that they have a motivation for being honest about it. But the idea of should we disclose, the only way I deal with that is I just don't think that we really have the control over this. How do you stop a process once it gets started? I don't know. And I don't know. I think ultimately we should disclose, because whatever the truth is, even if it's unpalatable, who wants to be spoon-fed BS for the rest of their life like they're 5 years old? I mean, I just don't think that's a good world to live in.
Well, and sort of like, I mean, the church had a lot more control when they tried to suppress Galileo, and that didn't work.
No.
And they had a great deal. They had more tools, to work with, and fewer ways for the truth to get out.
Yeah, very well said. I agree.
Do you make a very in 21st century mind, you make a good case for a very rational reason case for these SAP black program, how they started, how they could be maintained. It was pretty elegant, straightforward, made a lot of sense. And it took kind of, because I know there's sometimes how could all this be kept? I think reading that book, you do go like, it doesn't sound that complicated or hard, to figure out how it might have gone down. So do you think what we're seeing now with the hearings, with Arrow, with Kirkpatrick, with this sort of slap fight, is that like just a sort of fight in the shallow end of the pool? I mean, do you think those secrets are still very secure and unlikely to be dealt with? Or do you think we are seeing, cracks in the dam?
I think we are seeing cracks in the dam.
Okay.
I think we are, yeah. Definitely. Those cracks have been accruing for decades, actually, and they're just becoming a little bit more prominent now. But to your question, how long you mentioned special access programs, or SAP. Let's just discuss that very briefly, because that's quite relevant here. A special access program, I think many people know, some may not, what we call black budget programs. So these are programs that the funding is generally classified. The nature of the program is classified even to members of Congress who vote on appropriations for them. And the way that it works are kind of like those little Russian eggs, the matryoshka eggs are called, eggs within eggs within eggs. So you have a program within a program within a program is how they seem to work. A good insight to this came out in the infamous Davis-Wilson notes from a couple of years ago when they leaked out. I was sort of involved in that a little bit, and not in the leaking, but in the discussion of them when they came out. And in that, Admiral Thomas Wilson, who was deputy head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff back in the 1990s under President Clinton, did attempt. He learned about the existence of such deep black programs after he met with Dr. Stephen Greer, who went in with astronaut Edgar Mitchell and a few other folks, and they talked about this. Wilson looked into it, actually did find not one but four programs that seemed to deal with reverse engineering alien tech, spoke to the program manager and security manager and the legal expert of one of those programs. And it's fascinating the way he described this in his discussion with Eric Davis, who took very detailed notes. He goes there, he flies out. No one really knows what this company was. Maybe Lockheed, maybe something else. And the only reason they actually wanted to meet him, from what I understand, this is from another source close to it, was that they wanted to know how he learned about their program. That was the main reason they were even willing to meet with him. And this guy was, head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs. He was a very significant man. He went in there thinking, well, it's your mistake that I was not brought in to oversee this program. And they said, no, not actually. It wasn't our mistake. You just were not, we just don't want you in. Well, why don't you want me in? Well, we don't really want to tell you that. We don't have to tell you. And they went back and forth, and he threatened to complain. He said, well, I'm going to complain up the chain of command. They said, be our guest, go ahead and complain. He did, and he was threatened with his career. But I mention this because when he found them, he had to get a lot of advice from other DoD insiders. He's rooting around. And he finds a program, but then it was within that program and then within this other program, I believe, that he found this reverse engineering program of ET tech. And they had, according to what they said to him, they had an intact saucer that they said, well, even now we're trying to figure out how to make this thing, how it works. Maybe that was true, maybe not. But the thing was, when you study how that whole thing is structured, it seems to me there's almost no oversight by government officials, and that it strikes me, and not just me, as a program run by private contractors with protection from the U.S. government as basically their security force, so that these contractors can, with public tax money, by the way, study these technologies and maybe come up with some nice inventions as a result of it, nice patents. That's what it looks like. So it's a very difficult situation to untangle. And if I was a government person trying to get to the bottom of it, I suspect there would have to be a lot of legal obstacles that I would have to figure out a way to overcome. I think I'd need some really good lawyers to get in the mix there and figure out how to get access, because a lot of this is private. It's private, quasi-government, quasi-private, but it's not clear even now, like, what is the legal structure by which these secrets are being kept.
Yeah,
and
go ahead, Dave.
Well, I was just going to say that's sort of the mountain that the Rubio Gillibrand legislation was trying to climb, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think I was very surprised that they've even made some of the statements that they have made, which is some of them been quite strong statements about their belief that there's something very exotic about all of this, and their frustration about being stonewalled by the Pentagon and by the national security apparatus. That also is an old story, by the way. They're not the first group of members of Congress to try to get to this. There was a man named Stephen Schiff 30 years ago who looked into the Roswell case and got really stonewalled bad by the Air Force and the Pentagon. But yeah, with Rubio and Gillibrand and now Tim Burchett and a bunch of others, like, you can really feel the frustration from some of these members of Congress. And I think they know they're onto something. How confident they are that they're going to get where they want to get is a whole other story. Burchett feels very pessimistic from things that I hear.
Were you startled by the fact that that Schumer would weigh in on this as well?
I
That
was
he would walk
shocked.
into this world?
I was
Yeah,
totally shocked.
yeah.
Totally shocked that Chuck Schumer got involved. But, look, I was very glad. There's, a lot of things I disagree with these politicians about on many, many issues, but
Mhm.
I'll leave that there. But the fact that he, with help from some very, very smart people, was able to introduce some legislation, the UAP Disclosure Act from last summer, which I must say was a very well thought out piece of legislation. And actually, that kind of speaks to what you guys are getting at, this whole private nexus of power. So one of the aspects of that act was that it would put forward this concept of eminent domain by the government. Eminent domain, as many people know, is if you got a house where they want to build a road, they can kick you out, pay you the money for the house, and you're gone. But eminent domain being used as this bill intended against private military contractors who have possession of exotic tech and bodies, biologics, as David Grush called them, that I was not aware of that ever being employed in that manner. So it was kind of a radical move, bold move, and it's not really surprising that got stripped out of the final version of the bill. And there were some other good elements of that bill that I thought were, I think we would like to see get passed. This, an obligation by federal agencies to report, their UAP data. They were going to have a central collection facility that was going to manage this whole process. And most of that got stripped out. But hey, it can always get reintroduced.
We had a guest on, Brian Bender, who had worked with Politico, and kind of made he sort of like, it's probably a political favor, and Gillibrand's his junior, he was probably, these guys do each other favors, and I hear that. It still feels like that's a heck of a sort of public political favor to sort of go to all this effort and put himself out there without some feeling that there was a there without there being some content behind this, because the potential for blowback is high, and of course still a sense of, I don't know, I'm sure people are interested in this topic. I don't know if the constituency is so humongous that they have to bring it to the floor. That felt like a very purposeful thing.
And I agree. I mean, though I can see a definite political angle to it. Look, UFOs are not the end of one's career the way they were. If anyone remembers back in, I think 2008, during the Democratic primaries, one of the guys in the race was Dennis Kucinich, one-time mayor of Cleveland. Really interesting guy, and very kind of progressive. With my feeling was he had a lot of principle and integrity. That was my take on Kucinich. So he goes up in 2008. He had just been outed by Shirley MacLaine as having been a UFO witness many years earlier.
I think I remember.
And despite the fact that he had two people with him when he saw this, it was a black triangle. He was staying at the property of Shirley MacLaine. That's why she wrote about it. He had two people with him. They said, yep, absolutely. We saw the whole thing with him. Even so, he got ripped apart by the media at that time in 2008. It was absolutely the end of his candidacy.
Yeah, I remember being asked about it during a debate, and there was
giggling.
Right. Yeah, there was giggling, and he very carefully said, well, I saw something I couldn't identify.
Exactly.
Yeah, he tried to say it as blandly as possible.
We've come a long way since then. I mean, and I'm not, trying to impugn any of the politicians who are talking about this, but there's definitely a better political outcome. I think people are realizing that the public is interested in this. For many years, I would meet with people privately, and when I would let them know that I was interested in this UFO subject, this is in the very early years when I was researching my first book before really anyone knew me. I discovered people were into it even in the 90s. They were like, oh, wow, that's so interesting. 1 out of 10 people would look at me like I was, had something wrong with me. But most people were interested. And I think most people did not realize until they talked to someone like myself that they had a hunger for more information about it. I think the information just had to be presented in the right way to them. So I've always felt that there's a great potential, actually, among the public for a genuine interest in this subject. And I suspect that there are more and more politicians out there who are starting to become wise to this. Like, it's not the kiss of death. This is something that I can work with. And
I think there's an odd circumstances that right now talking about UFOs isn't the kiss of death, but it's happening at a time when doing anything bipartisan is the kiss of death.
it's
And
really remarkable that this is able to overcome that.
yes, because we have right now. I mean, we have they're probably going to lose this. The speaker's probably going to lose his job soon because of the antipathy to any bipartisan legislation, and yet we have the Schumer and Rounds not only writing legislation but then defending it after it got gutted on the floor.
Yeah. No, it's quite remarkable, I have to say. So I think we moved into a new phase for sure in the kind of the long trajectory of this subject, and where we're going to go from here is I got some popcorn too, and I've got my front row seat. I want to see how this turns out.
Well, I was wondering, maybe let's wind back a little then, because I think a lot of the people that listen to our podcast are finding their way into this subject in a way.
Yeah.
And I guess it'd be interesting to know, how did you find your way into this subject?
Yeah. It's a crazy story. I was back in the early 90s. I was working on trying to finish a PhD in history. So my field of study has always been history. Did a lot of European history, and then I did a lot of international relations, and then I moved into U.S. Cold War history, which is where I was when I stumbled into the UFO subject in the early 1990s. And I'll never forget this. So I was at a bookstore, and I saw a copy of a great book by the author Timothy Good called Above Top Secret. And it was the subtitle of that book that really got my attention, The Worldwide UFO Cover-Up. I mean, that's a ponderous title. He wrote it back in 1987, 86, 87. And I found it in 93, so a little later. But I remember flipping through the book and thinking, holy crap, I know this guy, this person here. I read his biography. What is he doing in a book on UFOs? I know all about this department. I read all about this recently. What is this doing in a book about UFOs? It was this bizarre feeling of what I later called cultural schizophrenia. It's like you've got the official truth that you're supposed to believe, but then there's this other stuff over here that looks like it might be true, but you're not supposed to believe it. And I was very curious. Here I was studying the administration of President Harry Truman at the time and the outbreak of war in Korea and all of this stuff. And of course, that's a period that's very, very rich with UFO history. Even back then, I understood that much. And so I bought the book, and I was like, holy, my God, this is actually really good. I got onto what was in the early internet. There were all the bulletin boards where people were like, you suck. No, you suck. I'm going to kill you. But there were some pretty good UFO bulletin boards at that time. And so Tim Good's book and the bulletin boards were my original education. And what was it like? Here's one thing I don't like. I don't like having a big question mark hanging over my head on something that I thought that I was trying to become an expert at. So this whole thing, was there a UFO thing or not? Was there a cover up or not? Can I just resolve this question, figure it out and move on? And that was my initial attitude. I didn't expect that I would be spending the rest of my life doing this. But what I determined, and the reason I became obsessed with this subject, was it didn't take long before I realized that there were a lot of declassified documents through the United States government, like actual U.S. government, military, intelligence community documents that talked about this phenomenon in the 40s and the 1950s and beyond, and talked about it in a very serious, at times grave manner. There were case after case of violations of sensitive airspace of United States military bases by objects that looked like flying saucers that were not supposed to exist, that did things that were not supposed to be possible. And, I'm reading these cases, 1952, 1953, and I'm like, what does do that? And if it was just a couple of sporadic reports, well, that's one thing. You can maybe brush those off and say, well, maybe someone misinterpreted. But there are so many of them. I don't think people who haven't studied this have an appreciation of just how much quantity of data there is of fully confirmed cases, not just eyewitness testimony, but eyewitness plus electronic confirmation of radar or other means of determining things. Very strong cases, in other words. And then when you read the attitudes of senior military and intelligence officials, that also, like, they were clearly taking this seriously also. And so that led me to ask, all right, well, if they were taking it seriously, at least in the classified world, did they ever stop taking it seriously? Did they ever figure this out? Like, oh, yeah, it was some secret project or whatever. And the answer is no, they never came to a resolution in which they figured this out. They told the public one thing. Sure, it's easy to lie to the public, but within the classified world, it was quite evident this phenomenon never went away. It never ceased to be a problem for the national security community. And once I realized that, then I'll never forget in the early, like my first year of really researching this, once I realized that this was a genuine thing, I remember many nights like lying in bed in the middle of the night, just staring at the ceilings and trying to think this out. Like, if this is true, then what does that say about all this other history that I thought I knew? What does it say about the Kennedy administration or the presidency of Eisenhower or all those guys? And I realized there's this massive hole in our history in terms of like a very, very significant part of our world history has been wiped clean. And so it really became my mission in all of the books that I've written since then to kind of mainstream the UFO subject and to kind of fold it into the rest of our world and national history. So that's really what UFOs and the national security state, both of those volumes, was about. That it was trying to bring this into a genuine historical context. And I've never stopped. It's just because the thing is, often I don't have any clearances. I've never been in the classified world. So at times it's like I feel like I'm a kid with my nose pressed against the glass of a store that's got all this candy inside. The lights are off and I can just see a little sliver and try to figure out what is going on and get whatever information that I can from what sources that are available. But it is an absolutely like far more fascinating subject than I could ever have imagined before I started my journey, which I'm sure both of you guys probably feel the same way.
Oh, yes.
I relate to the staring off into the, into the night going like, after a few conversations going, what have I gotten myself into? Like, what in God's name? And to that point, and talking about sort of sober analysis of really wild, topic, and one that we've covered, and one that you said at the beginning of the of this conversation was sort of getting ignored, is kind of the abduction aspect of this phenomenon that you touch on a bit in, not more than a bit, in Alien Agendas. Now I notice it says agendas, it's plural. That there's not one agenda, or potentially, and this is, of course, speculative, and you're trying, you're taking these stories and you're putting them together, you're trying to derive what meaning you can from an extremely complex, there are similarities to experiences, but also they're very, very different. I guess I would ask, at first, who are they? How have you broken down from your research what exactly might be here?
It's very difficult. I mean, it's a really difficult question, because when I wrote that book just a couple of years ago, not that long ago, and my motivation was, I remember thinking, like, I'd spend many years just trying to be as careful and factual, as close to the confirmed factual information as I could have. But I like to speculate. I like to reflect on things, and I like to just come up with different scenarios. I do this all the time. And I thought, why don't you just do a book and just be honest and put it out there and just think this through? What does it look like based on the data that is publicly available of this phenomenon? What are we dealing with? And I title it Alien Agendas, plural, because it looks to me that we're not dealing with one single group that is here. I personally, to answer your question, I'm going to say something first to preface it with. I've come to believe that a lot of what's going on really has to do with the trajectory of our own species.
Right. You talk about that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, because I'm very interested in history, and I'm very interested in our prehistory and our long, long, long story as a species. And, we very, very rapidly have achieved this magical level of technology. I mean, for most of our long history, everything was muscle power and horses, and before that, just human legs getting from one place to another. It's only in the last 2 centuries at the most that we've had any kind of genuine scientific, sophisticated understanding scientifically of our world. And, it's only in the last 2 centuries we get railroads, and then, balloons and railroads, and then telegraph, and cars, and then aircraft and missiles, and then computers and atomic weapons, and, all of that. It's so fast. Like, we forget this, because we live it, but most of our history has not been that. So we've very quickly gotten the keys to the kingdom, as it were. And so we're not going on this little straight path. We're shooting up like a rocket into the stratosphere. So I think that's why they are here. I think they're here to watch the fact that they know we're about to jump right into their world. And so I think we've gotten the attention of the galactic neighborhood. It's my theory. And as far as who are they? Well, in that book, The Alien Agendas, I try to go back and see what are credible encounter cases that go back through history. And there are a few that are pretty interesting to me and that I tend to believe. The encounters that those individuals had were generally with perfectly human looking beings, which seems weird. Why would an alien look totally human? But actually, the more I think about it, the less crazy it sounds. Like, if I were an alien from another planet, I wouldn't look like a human being. But if I were interested in Earth, and if I were interested in the human beings who live on Earth, because they're smart and they're on the path, right? Well, how would I interact with them? I might just scoop up a few humans, have them live with me, train them, put some implants in there, make them really smart, live a long time, and then send them down to work for me. I could easily see that as a very logical plan. And I wonder if that is the case. I think we have been monitored, perhaps for a long time, maybe in a benign way, for all we know, by one group that just sort of got a long-term, let's just check up on these humans here. But I also think
would that be abductees? Sorry to interrupt. Would that make some abductees sort of unwitting participants, or are you suggesting willing participants or designed participants?
Well, I can't say that.
Of course, you don't know.
No, I suspect that some of these humans just live with this other civilization. I think that they're part. There's the famous abduction case of Travis Walton.
Yes.
Travis is a friend of mine. I know and I like him so very much. But when you deal with the Travis Walton case from 1975, he was a young guy. He's on a ship. When he wakes up, he sees non-human entities, but he also saw very human entities on the same ship. And that's a weird thing. And he's not the only one who has had that type of experience. And so how does one explain that? You've got these two obviously different species somehow working together. Well, I don't really know the hierarchy myself, but it's not difficult for me to think you have a whole human population that's just been taken and they're doing their thing with a totally different civilization. It would make more sense for me if I want to interact with the humans to have someone who looks like them.
Yeah, and we're fairly easy to indoctrinate as a species.
Yeah. put a ring through our nose and lead us wherever you want us to go. It's not that difficult. But I do think in the last century or so, I have a cat that may want to jump up on my lap here and show herself to the camera. Hopefully she won't do
That's that's fine with us.
We don't object.
Yeah,
that.
cats are fine.
She's awesome too. I think in the last century, or when we start getting reports of definite like short beings, like 3-4 feet tall, with large heads, that is not something that I really can see in the ancient reports. Yeah, there's stories of like little people and leprechauns and all of this, but I don't really think it's the same thing. I mean, there's no reports that I'm aware of little gray aliens with big black eyes and skinny body. Like they're just, that's not in the ancient stories at all. So I think that they're new. Now, they're the group that people who have had abduction experiences will often describe, sometimes in a very negative way, not always in a negative way, it should be said, but they seem different. And, whatever that agenda is, you have researchers like Dr. David Jacobs, who has his own theory that they're in for a kind of planetary takeover. Maybe that's the case.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about David Jacobs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, he's very interesting, and I really like David. And is his theory correct? So he believes that there's an abduction phenomenon going on, very widespread. He thinks it's worldwide, with the purpose of creating a type of hybrid that can pass fully as a human being. He calls them hybrids. And is this true? I think it could easily be true. Yes. I think it could be true. I mean, there's lots of individuals I have personally spoken to, and a lot of other researchers. You're in this long enough, you will run into folks who've had encounters with totally human-looking beings who just don't seem like they're from here, who seem like they have an intense telepathic capability, and for whatever reason, seem like they come from someplace else. Are they the hybrids that Jacobs is talking about? Maybe they are. Or maybe they're an older human group that's just been here all along. I mean, I would love to have a scorecard with all the players that I could figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
But I do suspect that I don't really have any reason to think that other species from other worlds are radically different from us in that they're physical beings, so they need to eat food. They have bodies. They live. Eventually, they die. They have things that they want. Are they like us? I mean, we're a very territorial species, like basically all Earth species. All are territorial. I mean, not just us. Look at birds or chimpanzees. My God, they're incredibly territorial. But so are we. We've learned through territoriality and aggressive, basically military action. I mean, we are a military species. We've learned to dominate the planet by organizing collectively in collective violence against animals and against other people. And with that strategy, we've conquered the world. We are the apex predators. I would tend to think that any other species that has mastered interstellar travel had to have gotten to a point where they dominated their world as well, very likely through aggression and violence, I'm going to assume. Maybe they're not violent now, but of course it's easy not to be violent when you're used to getting your own way all the time, if you've got really great tech and you can just do that. I suspect that that's what we're dealing with. I think we're dealing with very, very mature species that are very used to getting their own way. And maybe they have rules and laws. I suspect they must. One thing I've actually been speculating about, and this is only recent, I haven't written this anywhere, but maybe on my website. But it occurred to me, like, you think of a species like human beings, and how difficult and unique it would be for any species to achieve a certain level of intelligence where it becomes self-aware, where it becomes able to engage in abstract thinking, symbolic thinking, like what we can do. Like that's it took Earth 4.5 billion years, as far as I can tell, before we were able to do it. Maybe there is an extinct species of dinosaur that did it, for all I know, but I don't know that is the case. But we did it, and it's not something that happens all the time. And I would like to think that if there's any galactic law that exists at all, I would very much like for that law to be, don't screw with a developing intelligent species, because everyone has its own unique qualities, and everyone has to figure out a way to work out its difficulties so that it can become a genuinely mature species. Because if you were to go in and intrude on that, you would mess everything up. Could you imagine, like, if an alien species announced themselves to human beings like 1,000 years ago? It would completely have screwed up our psychology, our development, our sense of who we are. I would like to think that that's a crime to do. And so 1,000 years ago, we could see that it would be difficult, but it might be difficult for us today. And maybe that is why these species, they're here, they blanket our world, they are everywhere, but they're not overtly announcing themselves to us. And I sometimes wonder if that might be the reason.
Mm-hmm. But it's also possible that maybe they were interfering with us, but we just gave them the title gods.
Well, there's always criminal groups out there, including aliens, and there might be rogue, renegade elements, like totally possible. And I could easily see that as a possibility, Dave.
Yeah. Well, I know for me as a lifelong atheist, I'm now suddenly, who's always dismissed religions as just fantasy stories. Now through the UFO story, I'm now going, well, maybe some of those things really did happen. Some of those tales from religions, maybe they were real.
So funny you say that. I've gone all over the map in terms of spirituality and atheism. Every position that's out there, I think I've had at one point or another. I'm not an atheist any longer. I actually, I don't know what I exactly believe, but I'll tell this story. I've told it once or twice. True story. I was in my early 20s. I had a dog, and I was feeding my dog a can of dog food. It's such a simple thing. So the dog's watching me, and I'm opening the can up, and he's excited. His tail's going crazy because he knows, like, he's going to get fed. And I was watching him eat, and I thought, he's really quite intelligent. Like, he knew I was about to feed him. He knows me. He knows a lot of things that I'm not aware of, sounds and smells and things like that. But my dog did not know how that dog food got into the can to start with. Like, he doesn't know that we have factories that make dog food. He doesn't know that he's been taken out of his natural environment to live with humans. He doesn't know what the moon is if he howls at it, like, because he's a dog. Like, his brain works in a certain way. And I thought, well, gee, Richard, you think you're so smart. So your dog's here, you're here. What's here? What's there? And I realized at that moment that I stopped being an atheist, because I thought, for me just to say out of hand that simply because I can't understand a kind of transcendental reality, because my brain isn't set up for that, for me to say it doesn't exist, I thought that'd be kind of arrogant. So from that point, I started to become open, at least to evidentiary claims of, like, weird things, whether it's not just UFOs, but life after death or ghosts or what have you. And I'll tell you, there's some crazy things that I do believe are true. And so I think that there's something else that goes on with this reality of ours. And whether that means that it's God with a big white beard sitting on a throne, or whether it means that there's some other dimensionality that I can't understand, I'm quite open to that at this point in my life.
Yeah, I think I'm at the point where I'm not throwing away my atheism, but I may be throwing away my materialism. And which I guess for me is that I guess the distinction is I still don't think there's a caring God who pays attention to us, but I think maybe there is a plane of reality that I had been dismissing.
Well, I mean, one thing I learned definitely is that the world does not exist for my comfort and for my success. Like, it's not there for that. And suffering is built into the system because that's what life does. Life eats life, and eventually everyone dies. Your friends die, you die. And
Mhm.
it seems like, where's
Yeah.
the justice there? But
It seems like it's interesting. It seems like what you talk about not being an atheist anymore. It seems like that's like a common occurrence in the UFO community.
it's not
That
that many atheists out there. Yeah, there were actually.
people start to really question it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good. Someone should do a survey of like the UFO crowd. Like, what are your beliefs on that? There's definitely a lot of New Age ideology in parts of the UFO community, which that's definitely there.
Yeah. You
You
can
do
call
have.
it. You can just call it annoying. That's fine.
Oh God, at times, absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, I went through the whole 2012 Ascension thing, so don't even get me started there.
Mhm.
But then there's a whole group of Christian ufologists, like they are out there. Some of them are pretty interesting folks. In the earlier years of ufology, there were, my sense, I read back and like the old journals from the 70s and 80s, there were a number that seemed very materialistic and atheistic in their inclination. It can't be know for sure, but I think it is true that I don't know how many are actual flat out atheists. That's a really good question.
Mhm.
I'm sure
Do you,
there's some. I have no
do you-
doubt there's some.
given the faith, I've thought about tackling this topic, and I was like, well, it might be coming. Is there a wisdom to getting to this topic, and starting to see things like signs, for example, which I used to be somewhat. I don't know if I really bought into signs, or if a loved one passes and then you see something where you've something. I mean, I was
What
always a
happened
little.
to me?
Well,
Mhm.
I want to hear that. I mean,
Yeah.
I have been dubious, but more recently I have, become more open to it. And there's a specific sign. You did a foreword to a book about owls and sort of UAP and symbology, and I found that riveting. I had
Crazy.
a I had an encounter. I haven't read the book, but I had I don't know how to call it an encounter, but was at my in my office. It wasn't this one, but it was my office was in another part of the house. But um, there was an owl that, and they are, sometimes you hear them around here. I'm in Studio City. I'm not deep in the woods. I mean, but it was there's some owls, but this was a almost mythological owl. I mean, it looked like it had to be about 300 years old. It was just I mean, I have a picture that won't show up here, but I did find it to be it was extraordinary. And I don't know what events were around it. I wasn't visited. Dave knows I've had different sort of experiences through my life, and I'm certainly open, but I was curious. I want to hear about your experience with signs, and I just want to hear about your takeaway of what owls mean in this
Oh, wow.
mythology. And that might be a lot, but
The
do your
book you're
best.
you're referring to a book by Mike Cleland, and the book is called The Messengers. And oh my God, what a book!
Okay.
That was a mind bending book. So Mike, he's fascinating. So he I can't really say this nearly as well as he could, but he had a couple of weird experiences that had to do with like important moments in his life where he would see an owl appear, and he started writing about this in his blog. And people would start writing to him about their weird, wacky owl experiences associated, whether it's with like a UFO encounter or a passing of someone, a death, or some other kind of mystical experience. Like, here comes an owl. It's like, what? So he put together a book of all of these stories that deal with these bizarre synchronicities that when you look at them, I mean, are you just connecting dots that aren't there,
Right.
or are you seeing an actual pattern? And I'll honestly just say, I think he found some patterns. It's been about 10 years since I've read that book, so I wouldn't be a good person to describe it, even though I wrote his forward. But yeah, it's a heck of a book, The Messengers. I actually recommend it a lot. He's like right in the tradition of people like John Keel, and even Jacques Vallée, who get into some of the more, you might say, interdimensional aspects of this. The story about the sign, I'm just going to say this here, had to do with the passing of my own father. which was about 5 years ago. And my dad was a character. My dad was an old New York City cop. Actually, that was his life. And he was 1 month shy of 80. His health had declined a lot, and he was in a bad way. I had spoken to him that day on the phone earlier. I'm very happy to say the last thing I ever said to my father was, "I love you." I was so glad.
Great.
I wasn't expecting him to die that day. But about 5 or 6 hours later, I was in our living room. I'm on the couch on my computer. Tracy, my wife, is next to me. She's on her computer. We're doing our thing. And I had just had these really great recessed ceiling lights put into my living room. I was so proud of them. So they had a nice little bright and dim setting. So I had them on the dimmest setting because I just liked the way they looked. So we're typing, and Tracy saw it first. She looks up and she's like, "What the hell is going on with those lights?" And I looked up, and they were going like bright and dim and bright and dim and bright and dim, like 1 second intervals. And I thought, that shouldn't be. And I got all huffy about it. I remember standing up. I stormed across the living room. I'm like, "Brian's a licensed contractor. That's not supposed to happen. These lights were fully, everything was good." And by the way, he is good at what he does. Like, those lights were perfect.
We're not calling out Brian. Yeah.
No, right. So Brian did his job. So I'm looking at the lights, and they're just doing this. And I'm like, this is nuts. So I just threw the switch up and down a few times and turned it off. Well, 15 minutes later, my sister calls me to say that our father had died 15 minutes earlier. Yeah. Now,
Wow.
look, you could say that's a coincidence. I can't believe it. I can't believe that's a coincidence. It's too crazy for me. And I think, all right, so what actually happened? That doesn't prove that there's God, by the way. But maybe there's something interesting about our consciousness, or like, are we connected to a larger sea of consciousness, perhaps, that somehow my father, who wanted to, and by the way, it was the most brilliant, and the only way to get to me was through those lights, because they had a dimmer setting. You could maybe manipulate it. So he goes 150 miles over the New York State Thruway, GPS's my house, gets into my wiring, and to say, "Hey, Richie, look what I can do." Like, is that what he did? I'll never know, but I'm not inclined to think that that's a coincidence. I think that was pretty spot on.
Yeah, I'm not. I believe in it too. I mean, I was actually briefly. I'm not going to try to do it now because I don't want to be distracted. Like, I became curious as we were talking about it, of like, when I saw that creature, this this owl, which was so intense, because I do believe it was around the time my mother passed away. But I want to kind of look at that. I'm curious of when it was, because she went suddenly in 22, and I've become more, I think I've become a bigger believer in the thinness of the membrane, in the and that a lot of this is a talk about consciousness, and I've been very fascinated by the consciousness of even these vehicles, that people say these, because there does seem to be a consciousness component to so many of these sightings and interactions, that people see them, but they also experience them in a way. Does that feel correlate to your research?
It's hard to make sense out of a lot of those claims, because I'm not those people. I can't experience what they claim they've experienced. I have met people, I'm sure every listener can relate to this as well. I've met people who I listen to them and I don't believe them. I mean, I just don't believe them. I don't know if they're lying or if they're deluding themselves or whatever it is, but not everyone comes across as credible to me. And I think there are a number of certain proportion of people who are just seeking attention, and they've got something going on that they got to work out. But I don't always believe that they've experienced what they claim. On the other hand, there are other people who seem very credible to me, that will have those types of experiences where they will get information in a way that just doesn't seem normal. I mean, I'm married to a woman who does great remote viewing. She's a good remote viewer. Wow. My wife, Tracy, really good. And some of her remote views are very well attested and documented. In fact, she had one where she was literally looking through the eyes of another woman several thousand miles away. She's Canadian, by the way. She was in Vancouver at the time, and she did a remote view of a woman in Florida who, I mean, I don't want to go into the whole story, but it's very bizarre, and it was a major hit in terms of that. Like, how is that possible? I don't know. There are mysteries to our existence that it's one of the great things. It's like, do we really want everything to be figured out? Like, how boring that would be. I like that we've got some of these mysteries that we're trying to figure out.
I think I've always believed that the paranormal is real. That just the sheer volume of anecdotes, even if it's just anecdotes, the sheer volume of it throughout human history says, well, if people keep having this experience, there probably is something to it.
That's my opinion as well. And I mean, now lately, I'm pretty good friends with Russell Targ, who turns 90 this month. He might actually have turned 90. So Russ,
I fanboyed all over him, and
he's amazing. So it's cool for me because Russ, I mean, I'll talk with him on the phone. He emails me. He asks me all these really questions about UFOs. I'm like, I think you were supposed to be an expert on this, but no, he's a remote viewing guy. He's not really a UFO guy. But Russell, in the last couple of years, really got me to think long and hard about something that he calls retrocausality. This is one of the craziest, freakiest things that I've encountered. So how do I even describe it? It's like,
I'm writing it down.
The thing he says is time doesn't exist. Time's an illusion. Now, you hear this from remote viewers a lot. And I'm like, well, what do you mean time's an illusion?
Right.
But basically, like, if you can remote view something that has not yet happened, and it turns out they do this a lot. They do this more than I had any idea. What does it say about what time is? What is time? So the idea of retrocausality, it's like, if you can see the future, the other side of that is the future coming back at you, influencing you? Do you have a future self that exists that tries to communicate with you? I mean, on some meta level. I mean, I don't really know, but it's fascinating to me. Yeah, retrocausality is the latest mind-blowing thing for me.
I said there have even been some experiments like done by physicists where they've made announcements that they've seen evidence for information traveling backwards through time.
Yeah, well, I think even the great physicist John Wheeler, famously did the double slit experiment, which it'd be difficult for me to explain that, but I think there's at least some level of support for all of this. So we live in a strange world. And by the way, to bring it back to alleged or prospective aliens or ETs or whatever this intelligence may be, I just suspect that they've figured this aspect out, to a greater extent than we have. So, we've got decent brain. We've got a nice little frontal cortex area there, and it can do a lot. But if theirs is bigger, or if they have more processing power up there, they presumably can perceive things that we cannot perceive. And maybe one of those things is a more accurate understanding of what space and time actually happens to be. It's just a thought. And maybe they can create technologies to manipulate those dimensions as well.
Yes, or perhaps they evolved with a consciousness of space and time not being real. That they evolved without those as concepts.
I wouldn't know how that works, but look, at this point, maybe that's what they're doing.
It was curious. Do you think this is sort of random, but talking about paranormal versus ET versus just weirdness in general? Would it be accurate to say you consider Skinwalker Ranch a paranormal site versus a kind of UAP site, or is that a little too? Am I being a little too?
No. It does seem like that. Skinwalker. I mean, there have been some UFO reports out there, but I never got the impression that the UFO density was any greater at the Skinwalker Ranch than in any number of other places. But what the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, for those who don't know, what they have there are these very, very large numbers of truly what we would call paranormal events. Jeremy Corbell did a really nice documentary treatment on Skinwalker Ranch. And the thing I loved about that was he, with George Knapp, was able to pull up a lot of George's video footage from the 1990s when he was investigating it at that time. Some of that video, I mean, no one ever saw before. It was incredible. One of the things that they talked about was some very strange animal mutilation cases, which were quite disturbing. In broad daylight, there was one of a calf that was unfortunately killed and mutilated within a 30-minute period in broad daylight on this wide open field where, like, you're not going to get anyone coming in there in that manner to do that, or even predators. Like, it just seemed impossible. And then they had stories of what seemed like a portal where I think Colm Kelleher was involved in looking into this, where supposedly an entity was somehow detected or seen coming into the reality. And then there was the story of that very strange kind of a dire wolf type of a creature that they took shots at and it wouldn't die. It's very strange. That's the kind of a case that really does make you think, all right, are the physicists who talk about, the different membranes and you've got all of these infinite numbers of realities out there, could that be what we're looking at? Could this be a different reality that somehow is impinging on our own from time to time? I mean, and is that a place, Skinwalker Ranch particularly, where that veil is thinnest or can be opened up? I throw up my hands. I don't know. Could be. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Are you ever tempted to go there?
Yeah, I've wondered from time to time. It could happen one day.
Yeah.
I talked with Travis Taylor, a few other folks have been to Skinwalk, Brandon Fugel, in fact, who owns it. And there is this so-called hitchhiker effect.
You don't want to go out. We're going to send Dave. We're going to send Dave first. Dave's the canary in the coal mine, and if Dave doesn't come back with a hitchhiker, then I'll consider it. Maybe Richard.
I'm still dealing with some kind of effects of long COVID. Like, I don't want to deal now. 6 months ago, I got COVID again, and it's not fun. I can tell you. Like, I want this to go away.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, it's not debilitating me, but I don't like it. So I don't want to pick up a hitchhiker now.
Well, see, I live alone, so a hitchhiker might be nice.
Yeah, little shadow figure.
Somebody say, hey, what do you want to watch?
Right. I just see Dave sitting with an 8-foot tall wolfen creature, like just flipping through Netflix. Just
that's
seeing
right out of Kids in the Hall. You gotta, when you put that on your Amazon,
just put it on.
Bring that in there. That'd be awesome.
No,
which, by the way, I'm just going to say this one time, but I want everyone to know I am a huge Kids in the Hall fan from the 90s. I watched all of Kids in the Hall. I watched Brain Candy. I loved Death Comes to Town. That might be my favorite of all.
Oh wow, that's the one we hear about the least, I'd say.
No, best.
Yep.
I was so happy.
Yeah, I liked that. I like that too.
It was great.
Dave, what would be your top 5 favorite Kids in the Hall sketches?
Well, obviously the parrot sketch.
No,
I don't know.
Come on.
I've never been.
Don't say they're all your babies.
Mm-hmm. No,
Dave, you were always the prettiest of the girls.
That's true.
You just had that happening. It was kind of freaky.
There's no arguing against that. In fact, it's the one thing the Kids in the Hall didn't fight about.
I was a big fan of...
Really, Bruce? Bruce didn't say he was the prettiest?
No, everyone just knew.
I liked Hecubus and Dr. Evil.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
Anything you did with Kevin McDonald was perfect.
I love Kevin. Yeah, well, I guess our Citizen Kane sketch is definitely one of my favorites.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that was great.
Perform.
What was the one where I can't remember? You had this French accent, and Scott Thompson and Mark McKinney were these two women talking about oh crap.
Oh, is it the Tony? Oh yes, the Hotel de Rat. That's right. Yes, and I was We did. I don't know if you know this. We did a reboot of the show. We did 8 new episodes for Amazon.
I Have to watch it.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
And the Hotel Lorette characters are one of the few we didn't bring back a ton of like the old characters, but we did for some reason we did bring those characters back.
Okay, good. I'm there.
No,
Lot of
that's
fun.
a
Yeah.
that's
You
a
guys
point.
were always.
Oh, thank you.
I'll just say I loved Kids in the Hall because I mean, you guys were zany. There was this kind of innocent edginess. It was like you had a little bit of both going on there. There is definitely, especially in the 90s, like a lot of the stuff you guys did was actually right on the edge there. But there was this kind of like kindness and innocence that pervaded it as well. That just made all of you guys just very, very likable and lovable. So
Yeah,
I enjoyed
I'm glad you feel it because I think within the Kids in the Hall, one of the things we've always said is that there's no meanness in our comedy.
That's
Like
it.
we've
Yeah.
we've
Yeah, you
never
guys
there's
were-
no like a lot of people obviously were very offended by some of the stuff we did, but we never intended to harm or hurt, or we never went after anybody.
No, it was very evident, and it was it was just fun. Like you guys were just
Oh,
fun.
thank you.
And,
Thanks.
yeah. So anyway,
All right.
enjoyed it.
I'm going to bring us back to UFOs and weird stuff before we wrap up. I guess I wanted to ask you, like in your journey through this world, are there any rabbit holes you went down that you then gave up on, and then how long did it take to give up on them? Were there any things where you went, oh, all right, this is just too crazy, this is just too weird?
Oh, probably. I don't know. But that's a really good question, and it caught me completely off guard, and I don't know how to answer that.
Well, we'll just sit here and stare at you while you think about it.
I'm going to check my watch.
you did that in a sketch too, Kevin. You did
Oh.
the stare.
Oh, right. Oh, yes.
That was a fun one.
That's true.
That was a really good one, actually. I don't know. I may have to pass on that. I mean, I've
Okay.
looked at all the rabbit holes, and some I'm sure I rejected, but maybe if we have a long enough conversation, I'll think of it. But,
Listen, I was going to bring up, there are some places where I have been fearful to tread or have gone like, all right, well, that's too far for me. I don't want to go there. I don't want to hear about it, or it's too funky. And you again sort of present like an alien agenda. It's just talking about the, lizard people or these kind of types of, for me, I think as you have enough of these conversations, it starts to feel like, okay, the brakes are off and I'm just going through these barricades, call them rabbit holes, whatever. It's like, it goes to this idea, like the speculation of conflicting agendas. And I found it interesting that you saw, is it right to characterize, you saw the research led you to suggest these reptilians were enforcers of some kind, or they were, I mean, I know it's very,
yeah, I just speculated in
it's
there.
not fact, that we know of, but
I'll answer that. I will say there was a statement by Jacques Vallée that really stuck with me once. He said, look, there are no unscientific topics. They are scientific or not based on how you treat them. You can treat anything in a rational or responsible scientific way, and that's what matters. It's not the subject itself that should inherently be scientific or not.
Right.
And I agree with that. In terms of like other beings, like people talk about reptilians, and I mean, I wonder about it. I can just say, like, I have not come across many accounts of genuine reptilian types of beings, but they do seem to be in the mix often enough. And yeah, I wonder if they are real. I don't really know. I mean, there's a couple of very involved, witness accounts that make such claims that there are very strong reptilian beings. In fact, one gentleman that I do know fairly well, he's a member of my website, and I've spoken with him at some length. He has had multiple experiences, including with beings that absolutely look reptilian in his view. And in fact, I included one of his sketches in that book. So I guess I do believe that there are creatures. I don't know if they're actually reptiles. I don't know what they are, but they they might look like that.
Or they could be another one of, visitors or that just are, whether they're reptiles or not, it would go to the suggestion that we're dealing with more than one type of being that people appear to be interacting with.
I think we are. I think, if the word got out even 10,000 years ago that this planet over here, Earth, has a species that has language, that is developing technology, that's starting to form cities, like, I would bet that they could predict our path. And that at some point they would know that we would discover serious science, and at some point we would be dealing with them. And so whenever that point was, I think we got on the radar of whatever groups that were out there that communicated about this. And I further suspect that for most of our history, we were being monitored, but at a low enough level that it would not impede our development. Now, Dave's suggestion that maybe they came in and became the gods, maybe that's what happened. I don't know, but they were not overtly making themselves known to us in any way that I can see. But in the last century and a half, I mean, the number of sightings has just gone astronomical. And I don't think it's simply because we're paying more attention. I think they're just here in greater numbers. I mean, people 200 years ago were very intelligent. They were very smart. They were outside more than we are. They were looking up, and yet there was no overt awareness of such a phenomenon. Why not? They would have been able to see all the things that we can see, but
much clearer skies for sure.
Yes. And so I think the fact is it's just that phenomenon wasn't as evident. So I think that we started getting a lot of attention in the last couple of hundred years because of our development. That's what I really think is going on. And I think that they're interested in our planet. I think, yes, they are interested in our water. Yeah, I think they may be interested in our heavy minerals. Earth is a weird planet. We've got a lot of heavy minerals in our crust. And from what little I've learned about like planetary formation, that's a weird thing. But it happened because we got this massive asteroid bombardment, 4 billion years ago, whatever. And we've got all this gold and lead and silver and all this stuff at the surface where it normally would have gone deeper toward the core. And so if that's a unique thing about us, that would be very attractive for a visiting species. Be like, oh, we kind of like those minerals. I don't know if that's what they do, but there could be a lot of attractions. We're interesting. We have land and water on our surface. That might be unusual. But we got a lot of things that actually are unique. And so I could imagine this planet. And besides, maybe a lot of other worlds have life, but do they have life as abundant and as intense as we have? I don't know. We've got an amazing world. We've got jungles and forests and all other kinds of places where life just happens and all of this abundance. I would have to think that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, certainly if we look at just our solar system as obviously as it's a study group of one solar system that we know of.
Yeah.
We are definitely, let's face it, the other planets are just shit.
I wouldn't want to live there.
You don't want to, not great real estate. Yeah.
It's about 8 or possibly 9 if you want to, throw Pluto back.
Very hot, very cold.
I'm kind of amazed Elon Musk keeps talking about going to Mars. I'm like, how do you expect that we're going to be able to do that? I mean, that seems like a really tall order, but no.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, and why? Yeah, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be fun.
As one of those media, let's say overlords, what are your thoughts on his adamancy about the ET thing? He seems to go out of his way to say, nope, nothing. I'm flying rockets every day, seeing nothing. I don't know. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's a little odd. And he's a very smart guy, obviously very brilliant man. Don't know. A lot of smart people have been dead wrong on this subject for a long, long time. So I don't hold that against him. hey, I learned that Marilyn Monroe wasn't much of a cook, but I don't hold that against her either. So
Mhm.
Elon Musk,
Mhm.
if he gets UFOs wrong, it's okay. I think he's a very interesting person
Yeah.
who. But I mean, I remembered reading some statements by Ray Kurzweil many years ago. Ray Kurzweil, of course, really the apostle of artificial intelligence.
Right.
And he had a similar opinion. He was like, well, this UFO stuff doesn't make sense to me because I would imagine that an alien species wouldn't need big clunky spaceships. You could have something as the size of a grain of rice that's super intelligent that could just do everything you need. But I don't think that's true either. If you want to take samples from soil samples, you need something bigger than a grain of rice. Like you need maybe you want a ship. But with Elon Musk, yeah, I don't know. I don't really know. I'd love to be
Yeah.
able to talk with him and say, "Come on,
Yeah.
you did stuff with Rogan. Like I'd think that you know,
Yeah.
you'd be on your game a little bit here. I don't know why.
I wonder
Yeah,
if
it's
it's
talk
a,
to him,
a,
I will
hu-
ask.
a hubristic aspect where he just feels like, you know, if the aliens were going to talk to anyone, it would be him.
There is that. There is that
You know.
aspect. You know.
Well, if I were an alien, I'd want to talk to Elon Musk too, probably. But you know, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
it's a good question. I don't know why.
I just find it interesting because I agree with you. There are probably about 7 people that do control a lot of. I mean, if you just watch the pyramid rise. I mean, it is lonely at the top there. There are just a few people that really do ultimately, you know. And I don't even consider myself a conspiracist. I'm just looking at, you know, understanding how media works and seeing the consolidation and watching the platforming through the years. You know, it's the ultimate. They have all just done this. They've just all done this.
Totally.
There used to be independent, you know, there used to be studios. There used to be, you know, homegrown businesses that were actual sort of studios with their own.
We used to have laws against the consolidation that we have now.
And that has really changed over the past 20 years and continues to do it. And now we are dealing with just massive, ridiculously huge tech companies that have swallowed most of them up. And you see some of these legacy media businesses now really struggling and fighting to survive. They won't.
No,
they're going to get gobbled up.
It's terrible. I suspect, though, that I mean, this is me being a fatalist. Sorry, but I suspect.
Okay, I work with Dave all the time. I mean, I'm.
I suspect that we're part of. This is in. Part of me thinks that we're on a kind of inexorable path, and that the consolidation, basically the global revolution that we are experiencing, and we are in the midst of a global revolution. Make no mistake, this is a centrally directed top-down revolution of human society to corral our species so that we are in a digital panopticon of control. I mean, that is what's happening. And privacy is going to go away for all time and all of that. It's all happening. And the question is, do we have agency in this, or is it just happening because this is the system we have created and it has its own logic? And I tend to think the latter. I think that the technological infrastructure that we have created, we serve the system rather than the reverse. And so this, like if we're living 100,000 years ago in the natural environment in the wild, you have to serve that system too, or you die. So you have to build a shelter, you have to have a spear, you've got to do all these things to defend your community. That's what you must do. In our world today, we live in a digitally integrated world of global supply chains and large corporations that actually naturally exist because we're dealing with mass amounts of products that have to be shipped, and so it demands consolidation, whether we like it or not. And I tend to think that we're just serving that system. We are inexorably, we are trying to become more efficient to function within that system. I mean, look at something like AI. 30 years ago, there was a fellow named Bill Joy of Sun Microsystems. He was a very major guy at the time. And he is warning the world in the 1990s of how we need to stop artificial intelligence because it's going to take over. Like, you know, and everyone back then was like, dude, what are you smoking? Like, how do you possibly think we're going to be able to not to do this? Everyone is committed to it, not just corporations, but militaries. And like every major powerful group wants that. And that's the case today. You got mentioned Elon Musk. He signed the statement along with Steve Wozniak and a bunch of other people to have responsible management of AI. Okay, great. But the thing is, it's too strong. Too many actors, whether legal or illegal, want that, and they will continue to push it. Militaries, U.S., China, Russia, any other nation, they want it. And so there's this kind of inexorable logic that forces us to create this kind of world almost against our will. So this is why I actually tend to doubt that we have a lot of control over this situation. I mean, that's not a nice thing to say. We all like to think that we control our destiny, but I kind of think we're on a very fast river, and we're just lucky to keep our heads above the water.
Yeah, and we kind of signed up for. I'm just going to say we signed up for it quite willingly. I mean, Orwell thought it would have to be imposed on us.
I know.
And turns out we just really want it. We're willing to give up our privacy for convenience. We're willing to, and we're willing to maybe give up our dominance to AI because it's really fun to be able to make your photos look like you're an anime character.
I know.
And that's all we need.
It is, Dave. It is fun
Yes.
to make yourself an anime character.
I want to see a dachshund walking on a tightrope.
There's some very cool, very rudimentary, primitive AI out there doing, the Avengers movie in the 1950s and things. Well, I would say Ray Kurzweil would think this, this is an inexorable road to heaven. I mean, it's going to be fantastic. We'll grow new limbs and we can live, to be 150, and AI will be a compassionate participant ally in our evolution. I probably ride the fence and probably tilt more towards Richard, what you're suggesting, but it does. I mean, speaking of Elon, because he can't help but be a part of every conversation. He's a very interesting guy, and completely agree. I mean, and he's defined Neuralink almost as a self-defense against AI. We just simply have to arm ourselves to be able to communicate with this fellow traveler in our world now.
Not just against AI, but against other groups, other human groups. So, we're very territorial, very competitive. We have organized ourselves into nations for thousands and thousands of years. It's what we do. So there's the adversarial relationship with China and Russia is not going to end anytime soon. So something like Neuralink, hell, you could see military applications for that undoubtedly, and all kinds of other. So it'll happen, whether it's to deal with artificial intelligence and compete, or to compete with other human beings.
Right.
It'll happen. And I mean, that actually terrifies me. The last thing I want is a wire in my head, because anything that you get off that web can also go the other way. And,
one would assume that is an uneasy, placement of circuitry is right into your memories and thoughts and et cetera. Yeah, it is.
I remember the first time. I remember when the cochlear implant was invented. Back, I guess that was in the 80s, I think. I remember the first time seeing that.
I remember that, yeah.
And my first thought was, that's how we're going to communicate in the future.
Yeah.
That's how we are going to connect to the internet. And I thought we will access the internet the same way we access our own memories in the future.
Yeah. Well, we've figured it all out. We've got the basic principles in play. We've got computers now. We've got, the sophistication of modern science in so many fields is mind-boggling. I mean, I am blown away by, when I glean some other field that I'm not an expert at, which is all of them. But I'm constantly amazed at just how sophisticated their data management is, and their algorithms, and all of these things that they can do. So I have no doubt that what you're saying will happen. We're going to have this kind of mind-to-mind enhanced form of kind of artificial telepathy. I just don't know that I want to be part of that party.
I know.
And it's sort of weird that maybe we could have just, really worked on the real telepathy in the first place.
Well, I get to talk to my wife about that kind of stuff. So she's on that one. And she's quite fascinating.
That
No,
is fascinating.
which reminds me, I think your wife, you're both going to be at Contact in the Desert, right?
Yes, we are both
You're
going
both
to be
going to
there.
be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Tom and I will be there as well. So
We
we're
Oh
can't
no,
wait
we're
to see you there.
absolutely looking forward to it. My wife's doing a really interesting talk on 3 alien abduction case studies that she got into a whole alien abduction research mode and interviewed a lot of individuals that were basically unknown. And she's going to talk about some of that. So I'm looking forward to that from her. I still haven't figured out what I'm going to talk about. So I've got to put that all together.
yeah.
Oh, well,
yeah.
I'm sure it will be fascinating. We'll be there for
We'll
it.
be watching.
And we loved this conversation, and it was really great to meet you, and can't wait to meet you in person.
Oh, totally. Enjoyed it.
And we hope we really hope we can do this again and just keep this conversation going, because this was great. We're really grateful for your time, and and to keep up with the most recent book out is Alien Agendas.
Well, I did a revision of UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, which did come out.
Which is great.
Later.
Oh, all right.
Which is
But
great.
yeah.
And the new one will be
the USO book.
Yeah, I don't even have a full title for that yet, but that will be out this summer for sure.
perfect.
I was just working on some more this morning, and I will probably have to publish that in 2 volumes simultaneously. It's actually too much. It's, but I'm happy about that. So
Very cool.
we're getting there. We're getting close.
Absolutely. Again, if you are new to this topic, or you're a veteran of this topic, this is the man you should be reading and listening to, because it's just thorough, reasoned, fascinating, and really super readable. And anyway, we're great to have. We're happy to have had you, Richard Dolan, on Really.
Thanks, Richard.
What a pleasure, guys. Dave and Tom, it was a pleasure talking to both of you for the first time, and I look forward to doing it again.